So I was chatting with my manager, since today is Manager Mayhem. And do you know at this point, there have only been, think about this, it's February 28th. It's the last 2 days. That's the last day of the first 2 months of the year. And thus far, there have only been 12 new pilots, 12 or 13 presented to this point. That's the final effect of digital technology, streaming, Netflix, platforms. The way distribution has changed in production. Wow, still haven't gone to Hawaii. Well, you'll get there someday. No question. I'm still trying to figure out when it is. I'm going to go for the third time on Magnum PI, but they just can't seem to decide to hire me, so is what it is. We're starting in 2 minutes, you guys. 2 minutes I'll be starting. But only 12 pilots so far. And that's where this profession is now. We started this maybe by 2005, 2006, but it's always kind of my joke about how you run a country or run a government. It's hard to move, a half-broken ship that's a billion times the size of the Titanic out in the middle of a sea. It takes time for things to change. It just does. And this industry has now officially changed. And pilot season just isn't what it was in the late 80s and the 90s when I first moved here. And it's not ever gonna be. There is no start time for new production. There is no start timeline anymore. That'll be a whole thing that I do at some point. But if you're out there wondering, or maybe you're one of those people who gets the opportunity to view the legit breakdowns, not the stuff that's on Actors Access or Casting Frontier, casting networks, or Backstage, don't be shocked that there have only been 12 new pilots, because it's just year round and it's just a constant little sprinkle. So is what it is. But yes, ping your friends, Carla, everybody. Get people here as much as remotely possible. I eventually, without question, would like this to be, several hundred people. I'm going to stick with the 9 a.m. for a while. I know that can be Merrick, there used to be, back in the day, it was 120. Ish. There was kind of a static formula, but again, that was based on networks. That was based on even before cable, but even once cable became a thing, and even through the early part of the 21st century, that was the case. It was 120 pilots-ish. But once production schedules started, once the sort of fiscal year of Hollywood changed because of digital technology and distribution, that entire model has slowly over the last 10 months changed. 10 years, 10 plus years has changed. And now it's just catch as catch can. So the idea that there is because a lot of New York actors would come out here for 65 days between, January 10th and mid-late March. And that scenario is just all changed now. Okay, guys, here we are. Happy Monday, 2/28. Manager Mayhem, thanks for coming in. And like I said, be sure, if you have not subscribed on YouTube, please do, guys. You're going to watch that channel change a bunch throughout the course of the month of March. If you look at it today or while I'm talking, and then you look at it on March 30th, you're going to be like, holy shit, what happened? I will be slowly in the process of building the greatest business of show business free library in the history of entertainment for actors, not necessarily influencers or producers or directors. Hey, Sheeta. Sheeta's like having to do this while she's at work. Okay, so Manager Mayhem. Now, I'm going to guess that a good percentage of the people here, except for maybe the Woodman, have at one time or another had a manager, met with a manager, and or would like to meet with one, and or have had a good or bad experience with a manager. And it's imperative that I like to present the foundation of stuff from which everything goes after that. Hey, CP, good to see you. So this is the point about managers, and even if some of this is a little bit, just a skosh remedial for some of you, just bear with me. We're only on this for another 25 minutes, so I promise I will get to some of the more detailed stuff. But the first thing we have to understand, and it's important, normally I would play around, make a bunch of jokes, but as Larkin noted, 30 minutes is just not long enough for me to do that. That's why the YouTube channel, you guys. Managers are not legally allowed to submit you. They are not legally allowed to negotiate a contract, a work contract. It's imperative that everyone watching this understand that, and I will, Merrick, I promise. That's the later part. I'm doing the foundation part real quick, but I will get to that. There's a reason why, and normally I would play around and I do Q&A with you guys, but I'm not going to. The reason why you have to understand that, hey Marie, that's awesome. The reason why you have to understand that managers are not legally allowed to do that is because of a manager's history. You guys have to understand that back in the 50s, post-World War II is when this all started. They were called personal managers. And essentially back then, the only reason why they were called personal managers instead of personal assistants is just because it was related to a performer, an actor. It's the only reason why. I want you to understand that. So they were the kind of folks who, yes, back then it was more hand-holding, it was more being there, emotional support, maybe strategizing a little bit. I love the Here We Go. I love that name. That's awesome, because here we go. So understand that managers started out as really a form of entertainment personal assistance. It is important to understand that. Now, I'm not telling you that I agree today with the fact that managers do not hold any legal standing in the hiring, human resource, work process of an actor. I'm not telling you that. What I'm telling you is that every single time a manager who defines themselves as a manager does not have an agency license in the state that they're in, whether they are SAG-AFTRA franchise as an agent or whether or not they're an ATA, Association of Talent Agents, potentially using a GSA, a General Services Agreement, managers are not legally allowed to submit or negotiate a work contract. And that has to do with, and I would seek to change that legislation, but there still would be requirements surrounding it. So it's important that you understand that legal premise. Any manager who's worth their salt has an entertainment lawyer retained, because only 3 people have the right to negotiate a work contract and submit you. An entertainment lawyer, a franchise agency, and guess who? You. Because it's the U.S. and you can negotiate your own stuff and represent yourself, which I've done many times in my life. So that's just the basis for this, in that it doesn't mean it doesn't happen every day in America, and however managers are viewed in other parts of the world is fine. But let's just be clear that if a manager doesn't have an entertainment lawyer handy, let's say for handling a big deal, that's not a very smart move on their part, because they don't have any legal standing to submit or negotiate. Now, with that said, part of the mayhem we get into that I want to be clear about is, why do we even seek a manager? It's a common question, right? And I'm going to share with you the 2 most common things that I've witnessed for the last 21 years, from 1/1/2000 to 12/31/2021. How about that? And that is this. Which back in the day, this is when this started, was, but a manager will help me get an agent. That's statement number 1. And then but dude, this manager, they're going to put me in projects. Like, okay, everybody just, let's take a breath for a sec. So first and foremost, as I occasionally make a joke, you wouldn't like it if somebody was going out with you because they were really trying to get to your roommate. And I make dating analogies all the time. So my point being is if you are seeking to get a manager who you have to pay 15% to, likely, because you want them to get you an agent, then understand, no matter how that actually promulgates out, what I'm sharing with you is that once that happens, let's say they accomplish that, then the point would be, okay, then what are you continuing to pay them 15% for? That's just a thought, okay? Also, one of the great things about technology, because I give technology a hard time with actors sometimes, one of the great things about technology now is when you meet somebody or somebody claims to be a manager and they claim to produce, what do we have today? We got research people. So the good part is just make sure if someone's pimping that line to you of like, oh, we this and that produce wise, just make sure you do a little research on them to actually see if this management entity, I don't care if the company is one person, I don't care if it's a monster entity like Zero Gravity, whose co-owner is a personal friend of mine. The reality is you should be able to research whatever comes out of someone's mouth about what they do or what they've done. If it's remotely in truth, you should be able to find it. Again, not trying to depress you. You can choose to be represented by whoever whom you'd like. I'm just the person who wants you mentally, psychologically, emotionally to be clear on what it is you're choosing to do. Hey, Ray, good to see you, man. So that's my point about bringing up trying to get a manager to get you an agent or get a manager because you think they're going to produce something and put you in it. Just make sure that you're careful with those two reasons for choosing to take on a manager. And again, please do your research, not just IMDb Pro, but take their name. Search them out as much as you can. I'm not talking about, you don't have to be best pals with your manager. You don't have to be best friends. But you should do as much research about them as a human and or about their history in this business, their resume, because what school is there to be a manager? Well, there isn't one. What measure of expertise or knowledge of this profession does someone have to be a manager? Well, there isn't one. Moms do it for their kids all the time. Matter of fact, I'm going to be on a show at 10:30 for an hour with my friend Annie Semenova, who basically, from me talking to her for 4 years, learned enough and then decided she ironically is Ukrainian. God bless those people. She built a consultation to the sort of Ukrainian Russian community for all the kids actors because she has a kid that's an actor. So people do it all the time, but just because all you have to do to be a manager, you don't even have to technically get a business license, but make sure someone has one. All you have to do is just get a business card and call yourself one. This was a joke back in the 90s, by the way. Yes, you can have a manager without an agent. Absolutely, Sheeta. And I'm going to get to in the second 20 minutes of this, I promise, Merrick, I'm going to address what you said about a manager's job scope, and I promise, Sheeta, I will address that. But understand that we used to have a joke back in the 90s when people, it's more the late 90s when people started thinking they would produce their own stuff. People would show up at parties with cards, and this was a common joke we'd make. It's like, yeah, I'm a producer. I have several projects in various stages. Which means nothing. It's just a pile of bullshit. So you could become a manager because you went to Ralph's, that's a grocery store in Los Angeles, and got some business cards made or sent it to Vistaprint and just said, I'm a manager. There is no legal line. That's why I started out today with the legality that managers legally don't have the right to submit or negotiate a work contract for you. So just understand that in terms of their history. And how you go about researching someone, please make sure you do that. Now, what a manager back in the day was supposed to do, and there are managers who do this, they were much more strategy oriented. Again, they started out as people who picked up your laundry and helped you when your relationship ended. But the idea of a manager in the profession today for a performer is that they are someone who has less clients and they give you more personal attention. That's a generic statement. There are entities that do that. Some of them produce. Yes, that's true. Some do. But the issue with this is what's happened since the turn of the 21st century is the following. And everybody hear me, Sheeta, especially the question you just said. Because what has occurred over the course of the last 21 years is in 2000 we had a commercial strike, and that is what actually led to the Association of Talent Agencies separating from their longtime standing agreement with SAG and AFTRA, in that they would only have agents. It was a coupled kind of thing, and they separated. That's why there's ATA agents and SAG-AFTRA agents, both valid. But because of that, it had to do with management and ownership and all sorts of other things I don't have time to express. But because of that, a lot of individuals who had great clients at big agencies, what they did was they started splitting off and taking their own, having their own business, taking two clients they could make plenty of money off of and just have their own shop. That's been going on for 21 years. So there are a lot of random individuals. Mickey's in the house, people! Mickey! So there are a lot of random individuals in this profession. I'm just speaking to the United States. I can't speak for other countries, but I know it's similar. Who are what I call, just as I call 85 to 90% of the agents. They're just breakdown representatives. I put them all in the same bucket. In that, Sheeta, many of them are simply looking at the breakdowns. They did an application, which is what's required by Gary Marsh, who owns Breakdown Services, to get the legitimate breakdowns. They got approved, and now they just point and click. They're just breakdown representatives. Oh my God, I can't believe I went this whole time without my pencil. Oh my goodness, now all is right with the world. So just understand that the truth of the matter is, when it's all said and done, a good 80, I make up percentages all the time, I just make the shit up, but I'm pretty close to right. A good 85 to 92% of representatives today, agent or manager, are just breakdown representatives. That does not make them bad. It just isn't what managers were initially meant to do or be. That's just not what they're just representatives who are just single individual shacks. So what they know, who they know, what their history is in the business now really matters a lot, and it should to you. And this brings me to the point that I have to spend at least 5 minutes on. And again, please understand, guys. Thanks. Hey, look, that's funny, Wood. It's kind of like the 67% chance that I have to make a 3-foot putt. Yes. I just make them up all the time, but I have been in this business for a while, so I'm telling you, I'm pretty close to right. So just understand that then we get down to our contracts. And this is the thing that really chaps me about this state of management in the U.S. regarding actors. And again, I'm talking about actors, okay? Is this. They tend to, just simply because it was always the case, they tend to like to sign 3-year contracts. Those contracts tend to be way too all-consuming. And they tend to, not always, they tend to like to take at least 15%. And remember, that's commission on your gross. And here's my favorite part. Because they call themselves managers, yet if I follow them around with a camera, you guys will hear me say that all the time about following people around with a camera, they actually function like agents. But because they call themselves managers, they commonly want 15% of everything that you do in this business, even though they may have nothing to do with submitting or dealing with commercials at all. Now again, this is not about right or wrong. This is about me simply providing perspective and education and information to you so that when you're in this position, understand signing a contract and choosing to be represented by somebody is a negotiation. You don't have to just go, okay. That's my Eddie Murphy from Raw. Okay. You don't have to do that. I understand why we do sometimes, but you don't have to. You can draw Cash Money Grandpa. That's awesome. I love that name. You can always strike through. It's a common phrase in contract language. You can commonly strike through lots of stuff. I mean, I was a semi-professional card player for 14 years. I knew people who, when the poker tour became popular, they had people trying to take money from them just because they were, happened to be on a show on ESPN while they were playing cards. So just understand, you have the right, you have the latitude to negotiate whatever aspects of this profession that you're trying to perform in and or that they are submitting you for, even though it's illegal. You don't have to just accept a contract that's probably 3 to 7 pages with a lot of fine print on it, that they get 15% of freaking everything. So just know that ahead of time. Again, I could go on for minutes and minutes and hours about this standard business thing. But this is an example. This whole 35 minutes today, guys, is an example of why, not against us, I commonly say, and I've been saying it for 2.5 decades, that we're the most undereducated profession in the world, bar none. I guarantee you, and if I'm wrong, someone find it and tell me, I guarantee you there's not one class at any university for any arts or bachelor's or master's program in the arts that does one class on managerial contracts in the United States of America. I guarantee they don't. You want to know why? Because their professors would not know how to teach it. That's why. So understand, I'm not being hard on you. I'm just sharing with you, if you're taking on a manager to get an agent or hope they produce something, and you're letting them take 15% of the gross of every single thing you make, but they're not actually paying attention to every single thing you make or helping you with it, that's probably not the smartest business deal in the world. So just understand and be aware of that. And the last thing I'll say about contracts in a short conversation known as an IG Live is this. You have to make sure that in every managerial GSA handmade by the manager, either one of them's allowed, you sign it, you own it, you inked it, you bought it, make sure there's an out clause. Make sure that both parties mutually agree in writing, email, that you have a way to get out of that contract at least at some point after 6 months. I don't have a problem with a representative, 180 days. I don't have a problem with a representative having a hard line for 6 months. But after 6 months, there should be, as there always was and is in our SAG-AFTRA contracts, way back when I signed my first SAG contract, it was 90 days. There were stipulations based on how many days I was on set or how much money I made as an actor, and if that hadn't occurred in 90 days, I had to write in writing to terminate the contract. That's the benchmark. That's the foundation in the history of these contracts. So what do you do if you have, hang on just a second, Paul, let me get that one. Paul, that's a great question. What do you do if you have an agent and a manager and your theatrical agent gets a job? Does your manager require a percentage just because your manager is part of? Yeah, that's literally, Paul, the contract I'm talking about. This is what I'm trying to say to you. The old school thing, I'll just do it as a quick triangle, right? Boop, boop. Commercial agent, theatrical agent, manager at the top. Transcendent, gets everything of everything. And in today's world, that even goes even further. What if you're doing foreign dubbing? What if you're doing a scripted podcast? Manager contracts tend to, even though they aren't really doing what managers used to do, tend to be all-encompassing of taking a percentage of any dollars you make doing anything. And that's why you have to be smart about it. So again, I have a manager, but I have a theatrical manager. My manager doesn't have anything to do with my commercial life. I'm with CESD. And if I book a commercial and I become the next all-state Mayhem guy, which is kind of like what's going on with my hair this morning, Mayhem, my manager doesn't get a dime of that because that's the contract I negotiated. He is theatrical only and 10% only, not 15. So just understand that managers are kind of, that's why they're not, there's no legal boundaries to them other than what you choose to sign. But just make sure you have an out clause, because a lot of managerial contracts, whether they're 1 page, 3 pages, or 7 pages, are very, very binding, and you want to be careful of that, okay? This is one of the reasons why I say I don't care whether you signed a contract or not. If you put your name on a social media established sort of TM trade marketplace website like Casting Frontier, Casting Networks, or anywhere else, and you say that this so-and-so here is my manager, even if you don't have a contract, if you booked a series tomorrow and because you didn't have a contract, you think somehow you're going to get away with not having to pay them, they'll take you to court and they will win, because it goes way beyond a verbal agreement. It's a good faith agreement in kind because you chose to associate yourself with them on a commonly used and commonly accepted form of a platform that everyone recognizes as being associated with. So there's a lot to this, you guys. Hey, Rennie, we got about 5 minutes left, Rennie, but good to see you again. Tell all your peeps. You guys also, I'm going to be doing these IG Lives 3 times a week. And I'm going to be archiving and saving most of them. I just finished this weekend putting the first 9 up on my YouTube channel, which is why you need to go over there and subscribe. The Kevin E at YouTube. I probably will do IG Live for most of the rest of the summer, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. At some point I won't. And if even I keep doing them, I won't always archive them. So take advantage of these now, but get your people. Get some people. Okay, so last thing about managers. Oh, there's my girl Mel Miles. What's up? Sarah's in the house. So here's my last thing about managers. It's like anything else, you guys. You guys have to decide, just as you do in a relationship, you have to decide when it stops working for you. Now, I can't decide that for you. Nobody can decide that. I know I just said the 6-month thing on the contract, and that's an example. And the reason I say that is because 6 months with a representative, whether it's an agent or a manager, is a good amount of time to do two things: to assess how your relationship is evolving, and also to assess what is their performance. We know what they expect of your performance or my performance, but what is their performance? What's that like? And you have to assess that. Now, I'm a guy who's absolutely willing, and I've done it. I've done it all sorts of ways, guys. I've had 46 representatives in my career. Hello! Just as we've done it in relationships. Sometimes you go on a date with somebody and you don't want a second date. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you go out and you decide, not so much. We've all done this. Then sometimes you fall in love and you get your heart broke and you start drinking a lot of Jamesons. Not that that's happened to me. Okay, anyway, my point being is that you have to assess it. That's why having an out clause in the contract is absolutely necessary. But I will still tell you that my benchmark, and it's been my benchmark for my whole life, people who know me know this, I will actually stay with somebody who isn't necessarily doing as much performance as I would like, because I still believe part of that's my responsibility as well, if I have a great communication with them. What I find has happened a lot in digital technology, and I will finish on this, and this is one of the things that drives me crazy, and it ain't a freaking song by the Fine Young Cannibals. One of the things that drives me crazy is talking to actors. Jameson, thanks, Will. Yeah, well, I'm healthy with my Jamesons. It is, I don't have an issue, but yeah. One of the things that's one of the most important elements of this is to understand that your communication has to be good. I know so many actors in the last 10, 11, 12, 13 years who literally, because of digital technology, pre-pandemic, so don't give me any COVID bullshit, literally, electronic submission, got an email, sent back an email, chose to be represented, never spoke to the person on the phone, never met them for a coffee, don't ever get to talk to them, never hear from them. Yeah, Kevin would not be somebody who would ever be for establishing a representation, you're representing me, a representative relationship with someone with whom I have never seen in person. Not a chance in Hades, and I recommend you don't either. And even if it had been for the last 2 years, since we're coming up on the 2-year, we're coming up on the exact, Amber J, superstars in the house! Just about to wrap up, girlfriend, but hang in there with me for the last couple of minutes. Even though we've been in a pandemic, you guys, the reality is, yes, it is personal, Rennie, it is, but it's also business. It's just business. And this is my whole thing about headshot photographers. You have to talk to people. You have to have a professional line of communication. That's why I say you don't have to be close friends with your manager, but you have to be on the same page with them, and they have to be willing to talk to you once in a while. I don't bother my representatives. But throughout the pandemic, once every couple of weeks, my manager and I will get on a Zoom for a half an hour and just have a conversation. That I established that when I started. I didn't establish that into the relationship. That was one of my factors for even being in a relationship. No different than somebody who smokes is a deal breaker, or somebody who this is a positive. You have to set those things as part of the table when you start out, just like in any relationship, y'all. This is not different. Don't make this shit different. Hollywood is no different than big business. It's not. It's a multi-billion-dollar, multinational industry globally. It's not. The more you do that, the more you're just going to harm yourself. So with that said, what I don't want is I don't want managers to be mayhem. And again, watch this, because I'm going to archive it. It'll be on the grid. Rewatch, send your friend. One time I had a manager, Mickey's going to bring us home. One time a manager who refused to even have a face-to-face meeting with me once a year. Okay, Mickey, y'all should know Mickey. Yeah, that's somebody that would be, that's why there's an out clause. Because someone could say something and I choose to be represented by them and then they tell me something like that 6 months later. And that would be me saying goodbye. Because and guys, I know that a lot of times, I'll end on this. I know a lot of times people look at me and, you know, they look at the book, they look at the 70 credits and the television and whoop-de-doo and they go, well, that's fine, Kevin, because you can do that today. No. Everybody needs to know this as I end this live. I've been like this since after 2 years I got into Los Angeles. And there have been many periods of time in my life in my career that I have gone without representation. Because if it's not a solid vibe and it's not a solid work relationship, you have a nice day. And especially today, because there's so much we can do on our own if we want to. That doesn't mean you should. I just want you to have a healthy professional business relationship with full understanding of the scope of what your manager is or what they should do and should not do. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. Yes, I am still a smartass, and that's just on coffee. All right, you guys, look. Please, please, please follow me here. Get your people. Go to the YouTube channel. You're going to see so much happen in the next 30 days on the YouTube channel. It's going to be nutballs. Eventually, there's going to be like 800 videos on there. Not a joke. So thank you for being here. We're going to wrap it up. You guys will be, hey, Christina, CC in the house. Hope the cat's okay. We'll see all you guys really soon. Okay? Holla! The worst. Yes, the worst. Yay, team. Talk to you guys. See you on Wednesday. Wednesday, 9 o'clock. Wednesday, 9 o'clock. Bye.